I'm happy to have Cory Endrulat once again on the Libercast to talk about these important information about these things that were sharing in this reality. And I want to thank everyone for joining us in the replay and on the live. Thank you for joining, and thank you, Cory, for sharing your time with me tonight.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited. This is going to be a good talk. Very important for our world and everybody who cares about freedom. Most people in politics tend to ignore this topic, so I can't wait to dive in. And maybe some people will get offended, but it is nonetheless the truth that the world will come to realize inevitably. I know it.
Exactly. So please quickly tell people where they can get your work, because you have plenty of work that people can look into.
Yeah, so you can go to taplink.cc/Cory Health. You'll see it on the screen. That is the link that has all my links. So if you want like everything, you go there. You can get like my books, different documentaries, different site links for different resources. If you're trying to create action, if you're trying to learn more about this information, literally tons of resources. You can find yourself in a rabbit hole all day. I know last time you brought up the One Great Work Network. I mean, you just go there, you see tons of
Hmm.
creators and you can be there. I mean, gosh, how long just researching and going through people's content. Everybody's got something different to share, and my goal is to sort of look at the world in a new light and help the world innovate in ways that they never really considered. And that is how we create our freedom. I see these current systems of politics, the current systems of how we create freedom, as ineffectual. They're not going to actually create change. They're not actually going to create freedom. And I'm glad that you're bringing this message to the French audience, because there's a lot of people in this whole world that we need to reach. You know, it's not just the
Yes.
people in America, it's the people in Israel, China, and all these places that some people might want to attack. It doesn't matter. They're all human beings. We need
Yes.
to help the whole world be free. Everybody.
So just if you want
Hmm.
to talk about the Liberator, just
Sure.
because I think it's a great project and needs to be told.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is where you're going to find the prime crux of my works, I would say, especially in the coming months, maybe when you're watching this video, theliberator.us. It's theliberator.us if you want to add the on top of the the link you
Yes.
have on the screen for people, theliberator.us. And the reason why you have to put the word the is because there was actually a newspaper in the 1800s called The Liberator, and it was started by William Lloyd Garrison. This is somebody who was considered a radical abolitionist, somebody who saw that there was a government higher than man present that dictated that man should be free from the shackles of another. He was an abolitionist, meaning that he wanted to end slavery. And that's what we're trying to do now when we want freedom. We have to recognize, are we enslaved? Are we being held back? Are we in chains? Maybe physically, mentally, spiritually, some people, maybe in their health, we might say. But these people, you know, maybe some of them were religious, maybe some of them were coming from a health background, maybe some of them from a scientific. You had abolitionists of all kinds. They had newspapers like the Liberator. They had other ones like the North Star, the Pleasure Boat, and there's tons of. They had newspapers all across the nation. The reason why I picked the Liberator was because it was particularly effective, and their motto was, "Our country is the world. Our countrymen are all mankind." So that goes back to what I mentioned before, is that we're trying to not just help one part of the world, we're trying to help the whole world. And as you saw in the
Hmm.
1800s, once slavery ended in chattel slavery ended in one part of the world, it started to spread rapidly to other parts of the world. Now, there still is chattel slavery today, especially since people have more so left off their guard from that topic. And they think, oh, well, it's just gone and there's no more. There is, however, much less chattel slavery now than there was back then because of their efforts in educating. Like, people are not going to even try it nowadays, enslaving one another. You know, it's not something that anybody sees as productive to society. Actually, we're more productive without it. And we see that everybody can act as equals, doesn't matter what skin color they are or where they come from.
Hmm.
And that is something that we achieve through human evolution. So these individuals, these abolitionists, really helped invoke that moral suasion, is what they called it, the moral heart, the conscience in every individual. And that's what they did through the Liberator. And I hope to do the same through the Liberator too, in facing this political slavery we have now, as Lysander Spooner put it.
It's very inspiring to see that uh, there's people who are true anarchists, true abolitionists, and have a symbiosis, a relation with this knowledge. Because I think the key here is knowledge, and knowledge about the self, and knowledge about how this world works, and nature. And I'm nature is one word that you bring a lot in your because I think it's important to realize that there's a nature, and that there's nature. For people have we have a nature as humans, and then there's the nature that we live into. And this can you just talk to us about what is the connection between abolitionism and natural law?
That's a good question. So, abolitionism, as I mentioned before, is understanding how slavery is immoral and needs to end. That's why it means to abolish. Once I want to abolish slavery, I'm an abolitionist, essentially. Now, there's some definitions nowadays that say abolitionism means you want to end any particular custom, law, institution. But historically, it was to end slavery. That's what they called themselves, these
Hmm.
individuals, or at least the media titled them, because they have to put a label on these individuals. Very passionate people who really just cared about freedom. And it gave them more power to say, hey, we're abolitionists. This is our newspaper, The Liberator. This is what we're trying to end. And they were grounded. They said, this is what needs to end. So having that singular message really drove the point home as to what needs to be done. Similarly, when we talk about natural law, the reason why I find that topic very important is because it's a branch of philosophy, in a sense, that teaches you everything. Like you look at natural law, it's like one term that has so much within it, right? I mean, Mark Passio has a 9-hour seminar about the topic, and within it, you have like different topics that we can talk hours on, just each one, right? So that's the beauty of it, is it's an art that you can sum up in this two words, although the two words might sound general at first, like what is natural law, right? But if we break that down, natural means inherent, based in reality. Law means existing in immutable conditions. So that means it's not created by man. Well, nature isn't created by man, right? So inherent laws, inherent conditions that we were given since we were born forever, right? And this is why we want to say we have birthrights as well, because the minute we're born into this world, nature provides us with faculties, the ability to reason, ability to speak, and all this stuff. And man can try to change that, but that was something nature has always provided man. And, man can say, well, maybe man should not speak, man should not think. It's like, no, nature provided you the ability to think, the ability to speak, and you should use it. You shouldn't be like, oh, I shouldn't think for myself. Like, no, you should think for yourself because nature provided it for you. So it's important we look at the foundations, because that is what we were given. So we need to work with it. It's like I can't go against the natural elements outside. I'm in Florida right now, right? I'm in a trailer. That's where I'm recording right now. I'm usually in a different environment, but that's why I'm not as professional. But you go outside and you see all these tropical plants and you see all these bugs. It's wild out here, right? The wildlife out here is nuts. There's alligators. You walk into the swamps, you'll get eaten. If you don't learn how nature operates, you're gonna get hurt. And that's the very premises of natural law. And I'm not saying it's the law of the jungle. I'm saying it's the law of everything. I'm saying that everything has consequences if you don't learn from nature. So when I say nature is the answer, that's my common phrase that I use, right? Nita.1, nature is the answer. I have that flag behind me. What I'm saying is the knowledge of nature is the answer. Knowledge, like you just said, knowledge is everything. Yes, and ignorance is the opposite. Ignorance says, well, we can change everything. Man can be God. Man can be nature. We don't need to know about nature and learn from it, harmonize our actions with it, but we can actually rule over it, maybe enslave one another, put others to war, tell them to fight people across the world that they don't know, and start just running rampage on the world and changing and re-engineering life. We see this with genetically modified foods, or there's even GMO mosquitoes and that whole outbreak with Zika, which I'm sure I have to talk about because I'm in Florida. But man has done so much. Even just recently, there's a red tide all along the coast of Florida. And people are going to blame nature for this. They say, oh, well, there's red tide. That means, we can't go in the water in the beaches. They smell the fish. The fish are coming up to the shore and the fish are dying. The fish are dead, literally coming up to the shore. And I'm like, why are there all this dead fish on the shore? This doesn't seem right. Right. And but yet people are like, oh, it's just red tide. It's just the algae. It's like, no, there's probably more to it. I do some research. I find out, wait, it's actually linked to green algae and human pollution. You always find out that the problem is not actually nature. Nature doesn't really have any problems. It's usually man misunderstanding nature, not being able to live with it. And so they always try finding different ways, and then they tend to overcomplicate it to the point where they don't even know. And so they'll just either blame nature or they'll find someone else to blame except themselves, even though they might be contributing to the problem. So natural law is all about responsibility. We tend to bring it back to morality because when you know what to do, you know what is right to do. You know what is right to do to the environment, to yourself, to others, because you learn from its behavior, its effects, what the outcome is. If you start going on a rampage hurting others, you're opening that possibility up for yourself. This is why natural law is equated to the golden rule. The same way it's equated to cause and effect and consequentialism and moral law and karmic law and all these others, because there's a billion terms for them, is because it's all just a matter of understanding that nature is going to give us back what we start giving to it. And so we get those effects sometimes immediately, but most of the time over time. So that's why we have to be patient with ourselves, be present, ask questions, and really reflect, am I doing the right thing? Not a lot of people may want to do that in a fast-paced world where everything is being thrown at you, instant gratification. And so it will take a matter of time for people to learn this. And I expect that everything I say here may be either confused, not fully comprehended, or in time understood. And that's the goal. Like, I'm not here to make everybody happy. I'm not here to be popular. I'm here to speak what I see as the truth. And I hope everybody else does the same thing too. And if natural law is the truth because it's natural, it's inherent, it's reality, we can't change it, it's what always has been here, then it's very important to understand that. So if you're trying to end slavery and you say, well, mankind is meant to be free, we're meant to be abolitionists in the sense that we all recognize that slavery is immoral, why do we say it's immoral? There must be a foundation to that. There must be an understanding is like, okay, it's immoral because man should not enslave another man. Why? Because perhaps you own you and I own me by nature, by natural law. So this is the connection between natural law and abolitionism. You say natural law, I own myself. Abolitionism, therefore you should not own another individual. That's it, right? So abolitionism is simply taking the knowledge of natural law into practical application of saying, well, let's not have man's law. Let's not have systems that actually inhibit our nature and enslave us, because that is not something that nature desires of our being. I mean, if we can't breathe, if we can't express ourselves, we're no longer living. Our nature doesn't even exist anymore. We can't learn. We can't do anything. That's what slavery is. It's ultimately the destruction of the soul. It's the destruction of a being. People can't speak freely. They can't think freely. And you see this in the 1800s. I mean, people don't have many possessions. And then you look at the Agenda 2030. They say you will own nothing and be happy, right? So you can make this connection and say, well, wait, you will own nothing, be happy. But then the slaves, they're a slave when they don't have many possessions and they need permission to go from plantation to plantation. They need to make sure they get permission receipts. And then you say, oh, well, wait, you need to make sure you have your vaccination card nowadays. You need to make sure you have your car registration nowadays. You need to make sure that you have your driver's license, all this stuff. And people don't see, wait, maybe that's kind of similar to the way the slaves had to work back then. And they were on this plantation, hardworking. Look at all the people working 9 to 5 nowadays in the United States. All these people like working really stinking hard. And they're being pillaged of their money. They're being taxed, and where did this taxation come from? And then look at the people who are being pulled over for doing nothing, for not hurting anyone, for the people who are being locked up for growing a plant in their house. Where did the
Yes,
police start? The police started with the slave patrol in the 1800s. You just look at the sheriff badges. They're actually the same. But
yep,
people don't make these connections because they don't know. And therefore, in their ignorance, they give way to evil. In their ignorance, they don't know natural law. They're going to give way to man's law. They're going to give way to those systems that control them. And so people
absolutely.
say we want less man's law. Well, then you want more natural law. That's it. But how do you want more natural law? It's like you have to live with natural law. It's not like you want more or less of it. You want all of it. You need all of it. You have no choice but to live with all of it. Right? So when it comes to man's law, it's like I want less of man's law. It's like, okay, sure, but you still have no choice but to live 100% to natural law because it's natural law. What are you going to do about it? Right? So
Hmm.
I simply summarize natural law as nature. So if it's in our
I think
nature to own ourselves, then it's in the nature of abolitionism to say you don't own
mhm,
another.
the nature of is evil of is destruction of freedom.
Yes. Yes,
I
and
mean,
that's the destruction of possibility.
this is the French version, but if essentially it's explaining the basis of slavery.
Hmm.
It shows you not on image, but on friend simple words, and
Yes.
it's a fantastic book. And I'm having I want to say that um I'm gonna ask a question tomorrow in French, and this I'm gonna have a baby like that to give. I'm gonna send it to you at your home. So for the French people, pay attention because I'm gonna have like a question, and you can have this one for free.
I think what people can start doing with books like that, which, by the way, for people, it's in English known as The End of All Evil by Jeremy Locke. It's a book that you can share. Like in Florida, there's actually book drops everywhere on every single beach where people pick up free books and they read them at the beach. I mean, I'm thinking, I wrote about 5 books. I can probably put one of my own books in there, you know? And I was like, what if people start doing stuff like that? You look at Lysander Spooner, he was a pamphletist back then in the 1800s. He was giving out pamphlets, sharing different ideas and different concepts with people, and that's how his ideas got popular. Thomas Paine, that's how his ideas got big out there. He literally went to bars and traveled up and down the United States, East Coast, and just started handing out his material in the bars, and that's how he got popular. So all it takes is a little bit of effort, and you never know who you meet. Definitely in Florida, the reason why I'm here is because I can network a lot more and I find opportunities like that, and I'm amazed. So I'm going to do that. I think another strategy would be for people to send books like that to content creators, people who are out there. They have PO boxes. A lot of popular streamers and popular YouTubers have PO boxes, and if they are really genuinely curious in knowledge and they want to learn about anything health, holistic, spirituality, or freedom, because I think that all falls under this umbrella here. That book might be really helpful. It might be really earth shattering for them. To see a whole new reality. And, my book, The Slavery Gone for Good, really summarizes slavery as well. And I use a lot of quotes from The End of All Evil in that book. So it's definitely a topic that I tend to talk about slavery, although it's a little tough to talk about because it's not easy, right? I mean, there's even abolitionists nowadays who still call themselves abolitionists, but they're usually talking about prison reform or something else. And I'm like, well, I want to stick to the heart because slavery still does exist, even in chattel slavery. There's
Hmm.
always an epidemic to fight, and we need to share knowledge. That's the best way. Some of these guys are like, we need to use the law to get what we want. It's like the abolitionists of the 1800s did not use the law to end slavery. They knew that's not how you change hearts and minds. You got to do that through education. Again, moral suasion. It wasn't a process of even education. It was just like open up your heart, see your humanity for once, look at the humanity. Look at all the people who are police out there, all the people in the army. Follow orders, stay in line. Boop boop boop. They act like robots, literally. And then you see the people who work in the grocery stores and all these people work in their 9 to 5 jobs, and some of them work like robots too. We're put into this society, and then we're watching TV, we're being programmed, we're on our phones where we are becoming more robotic. And then you wonder why I say nature is the answer because again, it's coming back to source. It's like naturally you have this wild expression. You look outside, you look into the nature and it's all wild, it's crazy. Is that chaos just because things are expressing itself, just because things are growing and blooming and things are rising and falling? Just because that is happening does not mean it's chaos. Humans can work with it. We got this moral conscience. We have this brain. We have the ability to build towers and skyscrapers and all this stuff. So who's to say we can't create order within our lives and with each other? Who's to say
Absolutely,
we can't do it voluntarily without violence? Who's to say violence is ever necessary?
absolutely. I mean, you. the- how you word things, I think it's extraordinary. I cannot do it like you do it, because I have uh my own expression and my own, but it's clear. I mean, for the people who will listen to that, I mean, just open your ears, because it's so important to know these things.
Hmm.
These are legitimate, like, true knowledge. And I just want to bring, because I think it's important. It's how is government is illegitimate and immoral for, I mean, on the material aspect and spiritual aspect.
Okay.
So
So,
I'm
yes.
we
Yeah. So, we talked about before abolitionists and anarchists, so that might surprise certain individuals. And of course, I mentioned political slavery. And with talking about freedom and talking about man's law versus natural law, it's only inevitable we have to talk about government and the systems that be and what man has done with this world. I made a specific small little book about this called Government is Unnatural, Anarchy is Natural, to sort of put into perspective what really hasn't been put into perspective for a long time, which is the idea that, well, nature or God is our government, and that man's government is sort of just an illusion, like anything else man creates. But it's a problem when people see that as nature, when they see that as authority. And this concept of authority is very, very important. Because if I were to ask an individual, say, is truth authority? Is morality authority? They might likely say yes. Because, well, again, they can't really ignore truth. Morality, most people don't want to create violence upon another individual. So that is authority. If you honestly look at it and you say, yeah, truth, I mean, I have to obey truth. I want to be truthful. I want to be moral. But then I asked them, well, what about your president? What about your government? What about, the flag? What about the Pledge of Allegiance, right? These things, which, by the way, Nazi Germany also had, the People's Republic of China has, North Korea, Soviet Russia, all these tyrannical countries all have constitutions, pledges of allegiances, flags that they worship. But yet, no, America's different. America is not like those. They're not the same. Even though America funded the Soviets, you have all these different scenarios. But we'll just ignore that. And of course, we're not taught that in school, maybe because school is to teach us obedience, but maybe obedience has something to do with authority. Maybe people want you to believe in an authority, want you to believe that you should obey them, and that their authority is legitimate. So that way you don't see nature. That way you don't see God's government. And then you wonder why you have so many, evangelical Christians like, we need to see God and we need God in our world. And they obsess themselves over that, but then they ignore the government, which is often taxing people and doing all these things which the Bible might say is wrong at other times. And I've met other Christians who say, oh, well, the Bible says we should tax people 10% of their income. I'm like, okay, so would you personally go over to your neighbors and steal their money? And they're like, no. So I'm like, all right, so if you're not going to do it personally, why should you hire someone else to do it for you? If you're not going to do it yourself, if it's not moral for you to do, what makes it moral for them to do it? And this is the very concept of law. Is that certain people have the ability to make law, you don't have the ability to make law.
yeah.
Certain people have the ability to take other people's money, you don't have the ability to take other people's money. Certain people get to be called president's ministers because they have a certain badge, uniform, and they were put in this title in this position, but you don't have that position and title unless you go in that system, unless you go through the same exact ritual, but other people can't do that as well. So, how is that equality? How is that equality? All these people talking about equality nowadays. Oh, we need to make sure everybody has equal rights and, the women in this community and that community. What about the politicians versus the people? You ever think about that? It seems like the politicians are always pulling the strings of these other agendas so they can distract from themselves, distract from their very existence. These politicians are gaining their paycheck from you, spending your money, your tax dollars. Just take that into consideration. Their very existence of their job depends on stealing from the populace. Because again, if you don't want to call it stealing, what is it? If you say taxation is legitimate, would you go over to your neighbor and take his money? Because I bet you wouldn't. And you say, well, I could if I want to. It's like, no, you know it's wrong to do. That's the point. Is people recognize certain things as wrong, but they give authority an exception. They give government an exception. They give politicians an exception. And that's the very problem. They say man's government does need to exist. It's a necessary evil, but it must exist. And therefore, they give evil an exception. They say evil is necessary, but then why is it evil? If it's necessary, how could you put that next to the word evil? Does that make any sense? If it's necessary, it's like, oh, this nutrient is necessary for me, but this nutrient's really bad for me. It's like, it's a nutrient. It means it's necessary. It's like, it has to be good for you, unless it's not a nutrient. But then that
Absolutely.
would not make it necessary. So, by definition, if it's evil, it's not necessary, or at least there's a way to live without it. And do people know that way? Well, look around you. Look at most human interaction. Is it done through coercion? Is it done through the gun of a barrel? Is someone always holding a gun up to your face saying, you need to do this? Or are people just getting together along with each other because they respect each other and they say, I'm going to participate in a voluntary society? Most people want a voluntary society every day within their life. They only create an exception due to the belief in authority. When they say, well, the government has the right to do this, but no one else has. The politicians have the right to do it, but no one else has. And then, oh, I don't like what the politicians are doing, so I'll take their place, but I'm still legitimizing the fact that they're an authority. I still legitimize the fact that I am an authority or someone is an authority over other human beings. So my next question would be, does anyone have a higher claim over your life and property other than you? And so you asked about the material and the spiritual aspect of this. You can say this is spiritual when I say, does anyone have a higher claim? It's like, well, what determines this? Morality? Where does morality come from? Some people will say it's religion. It doesn't have to come from religion. It can come from understanding the nature of human interaction. Again, can we exist in a world? Can we have order with among each other if we don't have morality? And do we need religion for morality? Because I bet there's a lot of people who aren't religious who are still generally moral, who don't violently coerce another. There's a lot of atheists that I've met, and I may not be a fan of atheists myself, but at least they don't go around hurting others because they know it's not going to bring them great benefits back. So in a sense, they kind of understand natural law without even calling it that, or without even having the great understanding of what it is, as you and I might talk about. So most people just know that violence is wrong. They just give an exception to that. And that belief in authority is instilled in us at such a young age. From the minute we're born, obey that flag, stay in line, follow orders. That no wonder why it's so hard for people to say, oh, wait, there is no such thing as authority. And that's what we're saying. There actually is no such thing as authority.
Exactly.
Now, unless you say it's nature's authority or God's authority, but like that, you have no choice but to follow. So it is authority, whether you want it to be or not. Saying that there is an authority in man is like something that you're creating. And it's like if you have to create an authority in man, it's not something that's naturally there. It's something you have to say, well, I believe this person has more rights than me. I believe this person can do things which other people can't do. Now, you might say, well, what about leaders? Can people lead each other? Yeah, people can lead each other, but they don't need to do so with violence. They don't need to write it down on the law and say everybody must follow this. I hereby declare, and I'm the king, and everybody must follow me. And if they don't, they're going to be thrown into a cage, and they're going to be sent across the world. They're going to do this and do that. Like, no, it doesn't make any sense. Leaders show by example. People want to emulate their actions. People willingly follow, and they follow, but they don't suppress their conscience. They don't suppress their heart. They're not saying, well, I'm going to bring these people to the concentration camps because I was told to do so. No, they're saying I'm never going to bring them to the concentration camps because that's wrong. Not because some person told me to do so because they're an authority, but because it's wrong. Like, it doesn't matter what someone tells you to do. I can tell you, hey, jump off a cliff. It's like I'm not going to jump off a cliff because I know it's wrong to do. And so regardless of what someone says to me to do, it's like I'm still going to follow my own judgment of what's right and wrong at the end of the day. If I suppress that, I'm actually suppressing my natural authority, which is my conscience, my understanding of morality, what I know to be right and wrong. And so when people are acting like robots in their armies and their police, suits and badges, and I'm super tough and I got this cool getup, yeah, you're going to feel like maybe I got this ego. I feel a little bit more special. I can do other things that other people can't. But that's the problem, is other people saying, yeah, that's legitimate. It's not them that's the problem. The one person that wants to be an authority, Hitler, who says you got to bring all these people to the camps. It's the masses that follow them, the masses that believe that they are an authority figure.
And that's a good point, Corey. We're getting back to the old belief, blind obedience, and collectivism that creates this old system. Essentially, the old system exists solely because of consent and
Blind
ignorance.
consent. Yeah, blind consent. Because
Yes.
most people, if they were given the choice of a voluntary free world and they knew what that world looked like, they would choose it. But people fear the unknown. People fear the fact, oh wait, we can live without government. They think it's impossible. They think, wait, we can't live without some sort of authority, some politician who is centralized miles and miles away, who we barely know, who's writing something on a piece of paper for everyone else to follow by threat of violence. They think they think reality is impossible without that. And I look at that, and the way I just said that, it's like, to anybody who genuinely looks at that, it's like, really? Do we really need that? Do we really need somebody writing down on a fancy piece of paper saying, I hereby declare this? I think humanity is done with that. The reason why the Americans revolted against the British in the very first place was like, we're done with royalty, we're done with kings and queens. But then they just introduced a more complex system that is way harder to understand. And it's like, you have this system and this system and that system and these branches, and they're supposed to regulate this and regulate that. And then we have this constitution, which is going to regulate everything. Meanwhile, it's basically broken all the time. And again, all the current tyrannies you see in the 1900s, all the tyrannies that happened, all had constitutions. And that's 200 years after the American Revolution. And a lot of those countries had their own revolutions, just like America, where they thought, hey, we're free. We're not like we used to be. We're better than we ever were before. There's never going to be an economic collapse. There's never going to be another war. But it happened. Why did it happen? Because there were order followers, because people still believed in authority. That's it. So we're talking about ending evil, ending
Yes.
all slavery. And that lives in understanding there is no such thing as authority. That is the same thing as saying understanding statism. Statism is the belief in authority. That's just another word to say. And then voluntarism is the idea that you want a voluntary free world. A good resource for voluntarism is .com. Voluntarist.com. And they have like a bunch of resources on that website. I recommend that for people because it's a very nice, like simple laid out website. It looks a little like old fashioned because they had like newspapers and stuff that they did over the many years. But they have a whole bunch of great resources for people. It's such a simple philosophy. Like I said, it's just you want a voluntary free world, and most people practice it every day. It's like, yeah, moralism, like spiritualism, uh, you know, it, even communism, like the word commune is not necessarily a bad thing. Community. It's like most people like community. But the problem is it got perversed into the idea of like, it needs to be a government. It's like, no, you don't have to add that part in. Like conservatism, like, yeah, some people like conservative values, family, and, different things that relate to conservative values. But then people turn it into, well, a conservative government and making sure that we have a strong police state. It's like, it doesn't have to be that. Same thing with liberalism. The word literally means liberty. It's like, it doesn't have to be, oh, well, we have to make sure we have a mommy state that gives us all these benefits and then this, that, and that, Obamacare and Medicare and all this stuff and government monopolies, because that's what they are. So, and it's funny because, I'm in the trailer right now going to a house that I have to get in Florida. You see that insurance, like, for example, my mom has been battling stinking insurance companies and battling all these companies because it's like, it's not really fair that there's government insurance companies. They take up the market. They have a monopoly. How is any private insurance company going to compete with a government insurance company? How is any private police station going to compete with a centralized, monopolized police that we have in the United States? How is Lysander Spooner going to open up the American post office and compete with the U.S. post office? Well, guess what? He couldn't, because they literally shut him down. They literally shut down Lysander Spooner's post office because they said, you can't have your own post office. We have to be the only post office. The U.S. post office must have a monopoly on postal. It's like, really? For post office? Come on. So there's monopolies all created due to the government, and it actually just messes up the market, raises the prices, and causes a bunch of problems for everybody. Meanwhile, you can live in a free world that's all voluntary. There's no violence. And, yeah, there's some violence here and there, but it's not justified violence because no one believes in authority. That's how you get to freedom. But you'd have so many thousands of solutions for everything. It's like, yeah, you want security, you can hire private security. You can, maybe there's probably some local stations as well that will likely help you. There's different numbers to call, not just 911. There's different camera systems you can get, different security systems you can get for your house. And there's all sorts of things. Maybe there's more weapons available, there's more abilities to create them yourself, and there's a lot more knowledge and transparency about it because there's all these different platforms and people sharing it about with each other. There'd be so much more innovation in general, so much creativity. People would be striving and trying to find the best solutions rather than saying, oh, well, I have to make sure I get a license for that. Oh, I have to make sure that's regulated. Oh, I got to make sure that that doesn't go overseas because, although it can be really helpful for medicine, the FDA has to be like, nope, can't have that in this country. Can't have this really potentially life-saving cure in this country. Keep that in India. That's what the FDA does, The CDC, I mean, gosh, look at the past couple of years, what the CDC does, right? The CDC can do the same things. I mean, all these three-letter agencies, people are like, let's get rid of this agency. Let's get rid of that one. Do you realize there's like literally hundreds of agencies, and a lot of them are self-appointed? It's not even like people have any power over these. But then it's like, oh, but we got to change the president. It's like, you realize that's one person. There's literally hundreds of thousands of other people like surrounding this one person. There's lobbies, there's interest, there's a bunch of other things going on. But you think that by just changing one person, you can somehow alter the banks, which literally control everything, and the systems that be in the international countries and trade and all this stuff. Like, no, it's just not how it works. The only way you truly change the world is you change the hearts and minds of everybody, the everyday person. There's even people nowadays who say that we got to use paperwork to prove our freedom. It's like,
Oh
I
my
got this
god.
paper, has my signature on it. It says I'm free. It's like, nah, that doesn't work. I'm sorry. um, yeah, it's not like our American, founding fathers walked up to the British and they were like, this paper says we're free. Are we free now? Like, no, they said we're a bunch of farmers. We are way less armed than you, but we're just going to free ourselves because we want to be free, and only we can free ourselves. And we're going to defend our property. So get off our property. If you don't get off our property, we're going to shoot you or take you off our property because this is our property. Like, this is our
Yeah,
country.
use
Like,
of
what are you
force.
doing? Yeah, use of force for self-defense, which is not
Yes.
that's not violence. Violence is initiatory
Hmm.
aggression. It's the idea that that it's justified to violently coerce someone against their will. And self-defense is someone else attacking you, and then you just preventing that,
Oh,
retaliating
they don't
back.
want people to know that. They don't want people to know that they can defend themselves. You know,
Hmm.
they don't
Well,
want
look
people to believe it.
look
You
at
know.
every country in the world. Most countries in the world, they don't have the ability to self-defend themselves, and then you wonder why
Yeah.
they're so controlled. Or look at China. Like, they have literally nothing to even protest with. The people had to hold up white pieces of paper to protest. I mean,
If
because
you
like that's the only
if
thing
you
they had.
if you defend yourself here in Canada, they can throw you in jail because of that.
Yeah. Well, same thing in the United States. You think we have the Second Amendment here, and now you have the ability to defend yourself? Maybe more than other countries, but holy
Yes.
moly, every state is different. Some states are very strict than others. It's all arbitrary. Oh, you cross this little border, and all of a sudden this plant is illegal. All of a sudden this gun is illegal. Oh, per depending on how much ammo you have in your bullet is how many years you go to jail. Oh, if you're just driving with a gun, oh, if you have it out or if it's concealed, it's like all these specific rules. Like, what if I was just an innocent person coming into this world, like, la da dee da, I just want to have a good time. And, I don't know about the government. I don't even know that these people miles and miles away exist. And all of a sudden, I see some person pull me over. I'm like, who is this guy? Like, why is he wearing a special uniform? Like, imagine I did not go through that indoctrination of the schooling system. Put yourself in the shoes of somebody who never went through the system, so doesn't even know what the flag is, doesn't even know what these cops are, anything like that. Imagine yourself like going through the streets, just doing your thing, and all of a sudden some person pulls you over. You're like, who is this? Like, what is he doing? And he's like, well, according to this law, according to that, and you're like, what are you talking about? What law? Like, who wrote this? I don't know this person. Like, is this a contract? Did I sign this personally? Like, what are you talking about? I didn't harm anybody. Why are you stopping me? Did I harm anybody? Is anyone else here alarmed at what I did? Like, I just ran a traffic light by accident, or I went too fast over the speed limit. Like, what speed limit? Was there a sign I was supposed to pay attention to? I mean, like, I didn't harm anybody. There was nobody around, or maybe I was going downhill and maybe you were watching and trying to find people so you can give them a ticket. Like, some of these police people, I mean, this is how they make their money as well, right? By
Sure.
basically torturing or bullying people. And it's
Yes.
crazy. So, but that's the system we create for ourselves. We create for ourselves our own corruption. We create for ourselves our own ignorance. And people want to say, well, we just got to change those people. It's like we created it ourselves, you and I, everybody.
Yes.
Like, even just me right now, I am creating it because I'm not saying to everybody, stop paying taxes right now. Like, if I did that, yeah, there's probably going to be some complications. But guess what? We have to get there together as a human species when enough of us understand why we shouldn't. We can't just say, oh, okay, hey, Fred, tomorrow we're going to live in anarchy. There's not going to be any government. It's like, no, it doesn't work like that. Like, that's not actually how freedom works. Freedom works through an exercise of rights, right? You have to
Yes.
exercise your freedom. You have to prove your responsibility. Like, how do you prove that you own yourself other than being responsible? Like, if you say, I own this car, it's like, how do you know you own that car unless you put your name on it? You make sure you're responsible for it, and you have proper designation. It's like, this is mine, and I take care of it. I use it all the time, and I worked for it. I used my own money for it. Like, it it's just common sense for most
Yes.
people. What is responsibility? What is ownership? But yet,
Yeah.
here you have some politicians, and they can change that any second, at any day, at any time, in any place of the world, just with the scribble of a pen on a piece of paper. Like,
Lies.
that's how
It's all
dangerous a
lies.
politician is. They can literally change or alter reality with a pen and paper. That shouldn't happen in reality. That,
No.
like, nature should not change because of one person's opinion, one person and what they think how everything should work for everybody else, whether they like it or not, for their own life.
And I like the example that Mark Passio says that you take two people. These people are alone in on an island, and how does it like slavery starts? And it's. I mean, there's no way to justify the use of government and technocratic authoritarianism, and I repeat that a lot. You know, when there's violence that made against you, it's your responsibility to put a stop to it.
Yeah.
And people don't like it, but it's
Hmm.
still the truth. You know,
Yeah.
when you see injustice, when you see things that are wrong and evil, it's our responsibility as a people to stop it, to take the
Yes.
amount of force that we need to stop it.
Hmm.
And sadly, we're an handful of people who understand these principles, and this need to be thought to children. We need to get back to true education, because and empowerment, not
Yeah.
repetition and indoctrination.
Yeah.
They're putting you and me into boxes, and it's limiting our potential as humans. You know, it
Hmm.
it prevents us from being humans, and this beautiful experience that is the life in this 3D world and the spiritual world, that is growing, not regression, no, not involution.
Hmm.
We're supposed to go forth, not
Right.
backward.
Yeah, that this is why we ended slavery after 6,000 years, and why we can end government after, 6,000 years as well. Like slavery only ended like 200 years ago. So it's important to realize if we went that long with such a system and we got rid of it, and society says, hey, this feels actually quite natural, quite normal. Why did we have slaves in the very first place? We will actually feel the same way when we get rid of this system that we know is immoral, that we know is not right for us. This is why I said in the very beginning, I said it's inevitable. You have Larkin Rose, his movie coming out very soon, The Jones Plantation. I look forward to that because this is something that will really break it down for people, especially my message with abolitionism and slavery. I mean, how fitting. It's a plantation. He's taking it from the position of a slave owner, and the whole movie's about that. And it's talking about freedom and slavery, and what can the slave master do to make the slaves enjoy the plantation, or actually want to be enslaved, or not realize that they are enslaved, because that exactly is the condition that humanity is currently in. A lot of the people in politics, Republicans, liberals, doesn't matter, even libertarians, all still have this belief called statism, which keeps them enslaved. And they don't know it because they don't know that belief system. I talk to many libertarians, and a lot of people in our space may call themselves libertarians, but yet they don't even know about statism. So I'm like, interesting, libertarianism is a pretty broad label because it includes like literally people who don't even know each other half the time. But it's the end of the day, we're all just human beings, and we need to get past all these dividing terms of like, I'm this, I'm that, I'm that. Like, great, you're that, but don't impose that on everybody else. Like, great, my ice cream flavor favorite one is mint chocolate chip. I don't want Fred over here to eat mint chocolate chip just because I say it's the best ice cream in the world, and that no one else should have any other ice cream. But then someone's going to say, well, what if it's really necessary that, he eats that favorite ice cream? It's like, no, no, just because you think it's necessary does not mean he thinks it's necessary. Just because you think it's necessary, it doesn't matter how necessary you may think or justify it. If you think it's so necessary, you don't need violence. You don't need violence to prove it. You can teach it, you can share it. And that's how you share or teach anybody anything. How do you really teach someone something if you're always beating down on them, abusing them, having this relationship where you say, you must obey? That's an abusive relationship. It's not a
Yes.
healthy relationship. It's not a way of truly learning. It's not a way of truly evolving either. It's a very primitive, instinctual side of humanity. We got the gun power. We have the power to rule over. You must obey us. That's not. There's nothing moral or courageous or conscience about that. There's nothing. There's. It's all just instinctual. We have the instinct. You must obey us, and you must be in fear all this time. Suppress your love. Suppress your conscience.
Yes.
Just do what you're told. Be an order follower. Be in fear. That's instinct. And then the person who's giving that order is saying, well, I need to project my insecurity on you. I need to make sure that I'm fearful of you escaping my plantation. I fear you escaping my government. I need to make sure you're under control. So they have insecurities, as above, so below, right? They're in fear. The people below them are in fear. They think, oh, we can create this elusive system. And if we can convince these people that it's a natural system, essentially, because they're born into it, they will fall right into our illusion. They'll give us all the money we want that we say we want to take from them because they believe it's necessary. People will say taxes are necessary, laws are necessary, governments are necessary. Again, necessary evils, people will even admit, because they say, well, if I ask them, if any, what doesn't work better in a private, localized, voluntary system? What doesn't work better than, like, what works better than that? Tell me, does a government system work better than a voluntary, local, community-based system? Because most of the time it doesn't, and basically all the time it doesn't actually. And
Yes.
I would like to see if anybody has any examples for me. They're going to say, "Oh, well, we need court systems," and all. It's like you can have a court system in a free world. You can have leaders in a
Hey,
free world.
Corey,
You
you
can
you
have all
for
that.
you forgot about the roads. What
I
about the
forgot
road?
about the roads. I forgot about them. I forgot about the slaves picking cotton. You know what I mean? Like, man, what would we do without the slaves picking cotton? I mean, geez, man. It's like it's like we need this cotton
Yeah,
really
it's
badly.
not the same thing.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
it and now we have machinery. It's even more like you see these laws are becoming irrelevant more rapidly by the day as technology is improving because it's like, oh
Hmm.
shoot, impersonation laws. We have AI that can replicate anybody's voice, anybody's image. Kind of got to throw them all out the window. You know, it's like what if we learn how to fly? Well, there goes all the traffic laws. There goes every single law in existence for, traffic lights. But then people say, well, we don't know how to fly. That's why we need to have road laws. We need to have laws on the road. I know every single excuse people will try to bring up to me, like just by heart, right? Because it's so easy for them to come up with these assumptions without really thinking through their logic. Okay, you have reasonable concerns. People might drive crazy on the roads. Does that justify having a centralized monopoly of violence to make sure people do certain things and register for a receipt? Is that little piece of paper, that registration, really going to save lives? Or is it actually people being more conscious of their environment and looking around them and being more responsible over what they own? What makes people more responsible over what they own and what they have? Maybe it would be a free world, a world where they have to pay attention to what they're doing and where they're going, and not just saying, "Oh, well, the cops saying, oh, they have it. No, don't worry about it. These people got it. They have it. They have it covered. I don't need to be responsible over my life. They can do it all for me." It's like, no, you should always be in control of your own life. That's how you're free, and you're going to be much happier
Exactly.
when you have control of your own life, your own destiny. You can say, "Hey, I want to go to South Korea. I want to go to Mexico. I want to travel the world." But no, it's like you got to make sure you have a mask on, have this shot, make sure you have this paper, make sure you have this and that. It's like, well, gosh, I don't want to travel the world anymore because I have to. It's like I can't explore nature. I can't. It's like, am I really a human being anymore? It's like at the end of the day, you become the robot because they make you a robot. You have to do what they say, and you're programmed into thinking, yeah, I should do what they say. There's no other way. It's like
I
I can't be
mean,
free.
we are born into it. We are groomed into it.
Hmm.
So our
And well,
parents,
people
our parents are already indoctrinated. So the system doesn't have to force or use violence to create slave. They're creating by themselves. They're reproducing, and then they're creating other slaves. You know.
people see the immoral as moral, the unnatural as natural. That's the world we have right now. It's like
Yes.
this GMO food. It's got to be natural because I grew it myself. But it's like, okay, you grew it yourself does not make it a natural food. How long has that thing existed? I mean, where did you get the seed from? Did you use any pesticides? Just it, you can get even clearer, right? People have to question their reality. How much is of your reality actually reality? And people will find out once they look around themselves, oh, shoot, there's things all the time we live by. And the most dangerous one is this one, government, because it's dictating over everything. It's saying we own the land, we own the people within that land, all the businesses within that land. And it's like, what could that be other than nature? In reality, in
Yes.
nature owns the land, god owns the land, god owns all the people and the businesses. So if man wanted to say, wait, if we want to replace god, if we want to replace nature, what should we do? We should actually try to be that, make everybody dependent on us for our existence, make sure that they go around asking for our permission to be free, and basically indoctrinate them from day one, where they think their existence, their natural existence, is necessary upon us. That our existence and our material fantasy world of government must be necessary for their freedom, as if freedom is dependent upon slavery, as if morality is dependent upon immorality. That's the system we created. and
It's
people won't
crazy.
understand
It's
it. Yeah,
madness.
people won't understand it until they
Crazy.
they finally start taking the time to just read any one of the books we talk about, right? And all it takes is a little bit of time out of people's day, and it's the same thing with anything else in this life, whether it's health, right? Somebody wants to take a little bit of time to pay attention to their health, or something, anything else. Like I talked to you about learning a language. I wanted to learn Latin. If I want to learn a language, I'm not just gonna like say, "Oh, well, man, I want to learn a language. I want to learn about freedom, but I don't want to. I don't want to, look into it at all." It's like if you want to learn a language, you got to stink and take the time, put some time each day into it. Maybe you know, if you want freedom, take the time to look at differing views. Anarchists want freedom. That's what the word means. Anarchon means no rulers. It means that you rule yourself and that there's rules that you live by in order to be free, that you have self control. Because in order to have self control, you need to have rules, which is, like we said before, responsibility, which requires ownership and maintaining our usage over our car, over ourselves, our body. It's like we have to follow the rules of digestion. If we don't, we're going to end up bloated and sick and all sorts of things. If we
Mm-hmm.
don't follow the laws of nature, we're going to end up falling off some cliff thinking that we can fly and we end up hurting ourselves, right? So there's rules we have to follow. Otherwise, we end up hurting ourselves. We end up creating chaos. And the same exact thing happens here. If we don't recognize government is evil, we're actually going to create chaos. And every
Yes.
time we have government, we end up with chaos. But yet, anarchy is chaos. Yet, anarchy is immoral. Yet, anarchy is not freedom. Yet, anarchy is the exact opposite of everything people desire. Is it really? Or is it actually everything that people desire? And
Mm-hmm.
that's why they were taught to believe that it's evil.
Yes, and that's beautiful. And uh, I want to thank you again, Corey, for sharing your wisdom with us and your understandings, because I think all this stuff that we covered, it was a short one. It's gonna be a short one, but I want you back for maybe another hour or two, so
Okay,
we can get
sure.
deeper into. I wanted to touch onto some of your works, and I'm
Hmm.
very interested in it. So if you want to come back, and we can do another one when you have free time, and when you're, I mean, your work is I'm not gonna stress it enough, and I want to encourage people to go on let's see, Nita.one. This is the main website. Great stuff. I suggest it to everyone. I mean, the resource there. There's pamphlets that you can print. There's a lot of stuff that you can go there and learn this important stuff, this crucial stuff. And then you have the Liberator. The Liberator is going to be a platform with all this stuff, that the agglomeration, and there's going to be
Anybody can contribute.
exactly, this is an open forum, and it's going to be awesome. Just go there and encourage them if you have knowledge to share. And then we are both on the one great work network.com. We're part of this network of great workers and searchers and conferenciers and things like that. That it's all this stuff is so important. There's like hours, infinite hours of stuff you can get there, so I encourage you to get there too. And I want to thank everyone for being there tonight and sharing their time with us. That it's always an honor to have you and listen and take the time to listen to this information. So have a good night, everyone, and see you in the next one. Bye.